In the year 1882, in the borough of Greenwich, within the parish of Plumstead, Kent, there occurred a death that would draw the attention of the courts and the notice of the periodicals. The place was unremarkable. Naylor's cottages stood among similar dwellings where persons of modest circumstance lived on pensions and weekly wages. The household at number 3 had been occupied since May of that year by William Tregelles, a man of 85 years, formerly employed in the service of Her Majesty's Customs, and his wife Mary Ann, who would have been 81 had she lived to see the January following. They paid 3 shillings and 3 each week to their landlady, Mrs. Sarah Ellis, whose husband worked as a writer in Woolwich Arsenal. The Tregelleses occupied 2 rooms on the upper floor. Their furnishings were their own. Mary Ann Tregelles was described by those who knew her as a woman of good health for her age. She walked out twice daily. She attended to her ordinary affairs. She moved with a quickness that was noted as unusual in a person of her years. Her teeth were white. She kept a cat of which she was fond. She and her husband had been married some years, though it was not his first union. His pension from the Royal Navy amounted to £42 and 17 shillings per annum, paid quarterly. They lived on this sum and did not exceed it. Mary Ann had formerly kept a small school and received 3 shillings weekly from the parish, but this ceased when she married. It was said of them that they made both ends meet, and that some quarters they had more than £1 remaining, other times only 10 shillings. They were known to be on good terms. Louisa Jane Taylor was born in the year 1846. In the available records, her age at the time of the events in question is given variously as 34 or 36 or 37. She had been married to Thomas John Taylor, who held a position as an officer with Her Majesty's Customs. He received a pension of 5 shillings each week from the dockyard. The 2 couples had become acquainted through this connection of employment. Thomas Taylor and William Tregelles had worked together and were on terms of familiarity. The Taylors lived at Little Heath, Charlton, and rented an entire house, which was said to be well furnished, the value of the contents estimated at £30. On the 18th of March, 1882, Thomas Taylor died. Louisa Taylor became a widow. She had a small pension to survive on. The exact amount is not recorded. On Thursday, the 27th of July, Louisa Taylor called at the home of the Tregelleses. She told them she had come to inform them that she would take them to Ramsgate on the following Tuesday for a month, and that she had engaged rooms there at £1 per week. She stated that £500 had been left to her, and that she would receive this sum on the Saturday. She did not remain that night. She returned the following day, Friday the 28th, and said she had been to London to consult with lawyers, and that all matters were settled, and she would collect the money on Saturday. She went away again that evening. On Bank Holiday, the 7th of August, Louisa Taylor came to the house once more, and asked William Tregelles if she might stay with them for a few days, for the benefit of her health. He agreed. She was given a place in Mary Ann's bed, while William moved to sleep in the other room. It was not stated that she would act as a servant. She was received as a person known to them. On the Wednesday following the holiday, Mary Ann Tregelles went out walking with Louisa Taylor. She returned with her eye badly cut and strapped. Louisa Taylor explained that she had taken her to the dockyard station and that some boy had thrown her down. On the Thursday, Mary Ann was poorly but went out twice to fetch beer for the prisoner. On Friday, she complained of diarrhea and sickness and remained unwell all day. On Saturday, Louisa Taylor told Mrs. Ellis, the landlady, that Mary Ann was in bed and asked her to look after the old woman in the afternoon, as she herself was going to receive £500. When she returned, she said she had received it at the bank in Powis Street, Woolwich, and had placed part of it into a building society. She said it had been left to her by a gentleman, and that the will was made at sea. Mrs. Ellis went twice to see Mary Ann Tregelles while Louisa Taylor was away. She found her asleep. When she drew near, Mary Ann opened her eyes and looked at her as if in a stupor. After that Sunday, Mary Ann Tregelles remained much relaxed and sick. A doctor was summoned. His name was Smith. He came on the 16th or 17th of August. He attended her for a few days and then ceased. He was called again on the 27th of August. That was the day Louisa Taylor called Mrs. Ellis upstairs and asked her to see Mary Ann, as she did not think the old woman would live the day through. Mrs. Ellis found her very ill and sick. The color of the vomit was a dark green. Mrs. Ellis asked what made it so dark. Louisa Taylor said it was the motion coming up. Mrs. Ellis noticed how very black the old lady's teeth had become. She asked what caused this. Louisa Taylor said it was Dr. Smith's medicine. Before this time, Mary Ann's teeth had been very white. Mrs. Ellis had observed them changing color a few days after the illness began. Mary Ann was sick in the night and often in the daytime as well. The household was woken by the sound. On one occasion before the Friday, Mrs. Ellis asked Mary Ann how she was. Mary Ann said she was no better, very weak, and that she did not think she would recover until she had cleared all that nasty stuff from her chest. She also said that if she remained there much longer, she would be starved. Louisa Taylor stated that Mary Ann was not conscious and that her mind was wandering. To Mrs. Ellis, she did not seem so. She appeared always to be in a kind of stupor, lying with her eyes shut. On Sunday, the 1st of October, Louisa Taylor called Mrs. Ellis upstairs, believing Mary Ann to be in a fit. Mrs. Ellis found her sitting on the night stool, stretched out, stiff and cold, with her eyes fixed. Louisa Taylor was trembling and said she felt dreadfully frightened. Mrs. Ellis asked if Mary Ann had had any motion. Louisa Taylor said she had not for 8 days. Together they helped her into bed, and as they did so, she fell powerless on her right side. Mrs. Ellis asked the cause. Louisa Taylor said it was paralysis. Mary Ann did not speak. After they laid her down, her fingers seemed to twitch and move. Mrs. Ellis asked the cause of that. Louisa Taylor said it was convulsions. Mrs. Ellis placed her hand on Mary Ann's face and found it quite cold. Louisa Taylor said she thought the old woman was going. She told Mrs. Ellis to listen, that she thought she had the rattles. Mrs. Ellis heard something in the throat, like phlegm. She left the room about 8:15 in the evening. She was not called during the night. The next morning, she knocked at the door and inquired. Louisa Taylor said Mary Ann was a little better, but had experienced 2 more fits in the night. Mrs. Ellis asked why she had not been called. Louisa Taylor said she had managed herself. Later that morning, Louisa Taylor came down and asked Mrs. Ellis to lend her a shilling, as Mary Ann had fancied a little lobster. About 11 o'clock, Mrs. Ellis went upstairs and found Mary Ann trying to feed herself with the lobster, but unable to bring it to her mouth. Louisa Taylor began to feed her with it. Mary Ann swallowed 2 spoonfuls while Mrs. Ellis was present. She was not sick then. About a quarter of an hour later, Louisa Taylor came downstairs with a slop pail and said the old lady had been sick again and that she had put her back into bed. Louisa Taylor went out that afternoon and returned after tea. William Tregelles looked after his wife while she was gone. Mrs. Ellis went up several times. Mary Ann was lying very quiet. She was not sick while Louisa Taylor was out. About 10 minutes after Louisa Taylor returned, Mary Ann was sick again. On Tuesday, the 3rd of October, Louisa Taylor went out with William Tregelles to collect his quarterly pension, which amounted to £10, 14 shillings, and 3 pence. When they returned, Louisa Taylor told Mrs. Ellis she would pay the 15 shillings and 3 pence that she owed her. This was 10 shillings and 3 pence borrowed at various times, and 5 shillings for washing in August. She said that William Tregelles had given her 9 sovereigns to bring home to Mary Ann, and that she would give them to the old woman to place under her pillow. She showed Mrs. Ellis the money in her hand. She placed it into her purse and said she would pay Mrs. Ellis out of her own private money, as she had drawn £8 from the bank. She said William Tregelles had kept the remainder of his pension, and she did not know where he had gone with it. About 5:30 that same evening, Mrs. Ellis heard loud voices passing between Mary Ann and William Tregelles in the front bedroom. She thought it concerned a drink. The exchange lasted about half an hour. Louisa Taylor was not present. She was out. Mrs. Ellis asked her the next morning what the words had been about. Louisa Taylor said William Tregillis had wanted to take the £9 from under the pillow, and Mary Ann would not allow him to take it. Louisa Taylor asked Mrs. Ellis what she thought of the old gentleman. Mrs. Ellis said she did not know. Louisa Taylor said she had found a letter in his pocket, which had been directed to be left at the post office until called for. She said she had been writing to some woman at Greenwich, asking if he might come and live there after Mary Ann was dead. She said she had spoken to Mary Ann about it, and that Mary Ann said she did not know any person to whom he might be writing. Louisa Taylor said she had spoken to William Tregillis, and that he claimed it was his cousin, and that he would go there after Mary Ann was dead. Mrs. Ellis told her that if she left Mary Ann in such a state again, she would call in a doctor and the relieving officer. Louisa Taylor said she would remove Mary Ann to her residence at Charlton, and as for William Tregillis, she would send for Mr. Patcham, the relieving officer, and have him put away. On Thursday, Louisa Taylor and William Tregillis commenced packing in the front room where Mary Ann lay. There were books packed and a quantity of crockery and items put in readiness to go. Some were cast-off furnishings which Louisa Taylor said she would give to the old couple, as she would not require them at her new residence. The remainder were the belongings of the Tregillises. Mary Ann lay most of the Thursday very quiet with her eyes shut. She was sick at night. On Friday morning, the 6th of October, Louisa Taylor went out early and returned about 12:30 with a young man named Edward Martin, who sold watercresses. He had been visiting the house regularly since the 1st of August, at first once a day, and in the last weeks twice daily. He took his meals there. Mrs. Ellis had asked Louisa Taylor who he was. Louisa Taylor said he was Mary Ann's nephew. This was not true. He was not a relation. A few minutes before 1 o'clock, Louisa Taylor left with Martin, who carried 2 bundles. She returned about 6 o'clock. Martin had come back with her, and there was a cab waiting outside. William Tregillis had, earlier that day, reported to the police that items had been stolen from the house. On arrival at 6 o'clock, Louisa Taylor was taken into custody by Police Constable Edward Glanville. The charge was theft. She had admitted to pawning 2 dresses, a petticoat, a shawl, and a pair of boots. When she was searched at Woolwich Police Station, she was found to have 10 pawn tickets upon her. A day or two afterward, Mary Ann Tregillis was found in a state of collapse and near to death. She recovered sufficiently to give a deposition, a sworn statement, which was recorded. Louisa Taylor was brought by the magistrate to hear it being given. Mary Ann Tregillis stated under oath that Louisa Taylor had been living in the house approximately 6 months, not as a servant, and had slept with her all that time. She said she had always been in good health before Louisa Taylor came. She became poorly first about 3 months prior. She felt unwell and sick, and the doctor ordered medicine. She said that Louisa Taylor always gave her the medicine, 2 tablespoonfuls taken from a bottle. It caused her to be very sick after taking it. She saw 2 bottles used at a time. The doctor had ordered 1 bottle at a time to be used every 4 hours. She saw Louisa Taylor put in white powder. She tasted it and said she could not take it, that it was nauseous and as sour as vinegar. She took it, 1 dose or perhaps 2. She said she could not take any more, that it would kill her. She saw it was a kind of white mixed powder. It made her quite ill and quite in a stupor. In about an hour afterward, she felt a burning heat in her throat. She was very sick. Black vomit came up about an hour after she took the medicine. She thought she tasted the same medicine again afterward, but not so strong. She was sick again 2 months before she gave this statement. On Tuesday, the 10th of October, Louisa Taylor appeared at Woolwich Magistrates' Court. She was remanded in custody on a charge of systematically administering sugar of lead or some other poison. On Monday, the 23rd of October, Mary Ann Tregillis died. The charge was raised to murder. Louisa Taylor appeared again at Woolwich Magistrates' Court on Friday, the 27th of October. Evidence was given of a blue line observed around Mary Ann's gums, which was recognized as a clear indicator of lead poisoning. The court was told that certain of her organs had been sent to Guy's Hospital for analysis. On the 22nd of November, an inquest jury returned a verdict of willful murder against Louisa Jane Taylor. She was held at Her Majesty's Jail of Clerkenwell to await trial. The trial took place at the Central Criminal Court, known as the Old Bailey, on Monday, the 11th of December, 1882. The case was heard before Mr. Justice Stephen. The prosecution was conducted by Messrs. Poland and Montague Williams. The defense was undertaken by Messrs. Walton and White. William Tregellis gave his evidence. He recounted the circumstances of Louisa Taylor's arrival, the decline of his wife's health, the thefts, the matter of the pension money. He stated that his wife had been a fine woman before Louisa Taylor came, that she had got up and gone about. He said that after Louisa Taylor's arrival, his wife began to alter in health. He described how she was sick in the night, but scarcely in the day, how she would sleep in the daytime, how her appetite was gone. He said that before Louisa Taylor came, his wife had a good set of teeth, white in color, and when she died, they were black. He noticed the change in them a fortnight before she died. He testified that Louisa Taylor had asked him if he would live with her, and that he had said his wife was not dead. Louisa Taylor replied that she soon would be. He said that Louisa Taylor had told him she had £500 left to her, and had shown him a letter, and said she would take him to see her draw it. She never had it. Mrs. Sarah Ellis, the landlady, gave evidence of Mary Ann's health before Louisa Taylor arrived, of the accident to the eye, of the progressive sickness, of the dark green vomit, of the blackening of the teeth. She testified to the words spoken, to the borrowing of small sums, to the matter of the pension money, to the packing of the belongings, to Mary Ann's recovery after Louisa Taylor was taken into custody. She stated that after she herself began attending to Mary Ann, following the arrest, the old woman was never sick again, and her appetite improved. She sat up with her day and night. Mary Ann was able to speak and was quite sensible. She died on Monday, the 23rd of October, at 5:20 in the morning. She lost her speech on the Friday afternoon before her death. During the time Mrs. Ellis attended her, Mary Ann did not vomit at all. Matilda Stubberfield Smith, whose husband was Dr. John Smith, gave evidence that Louisa Taylor had purchased sugar of lead from their shop in the second week of August. She stated that it was clearly labeled as poison. She testified that Louisa Taylor made further purchases, and that she also arranged for Edward Martin, the watercress seller, to buy some on her behalf in mid-September. A number of other witnesses were called. Miriam Taylor, the widow of William Tregellis's former work companion and the aunt by marriage of Louisa Taylor's late husband, testified that she had lent Louisa Taylor 28 shillings after Thomas Taylor's death. She described visiting Mary Ann Tregellis in her illness and noting how ghastly she looked. She said to Louisa Taylor that Mary Ann did not look to her like a person dying a natural death. Louisa Taylor replied that the doctor said it was the decay of nature, and she would not live. Miriam Taylor noticed that Mary Ann's gums and teeth looked very dark. She also testified that on one occasion, when she visited Louisa Taylor at her residence, a letter arrived, which Louisa Taylor opened, and from which she read aloud a small portion. It concerned £500 that had been left by a friend who had died abroad or was coming home from the Cape of Good Hope. The name Colonel Sarton was mentioned. The letter bore the marking "On Her Majesty's Service." Miriam Taylor never saw the letter or envelope again. Dr. Thomas Stevenson presented detailed forensic evidence regarding the quantity of lead found in Mary Ann Tregellis's organs. The evidence occupied a considerable portion of the proceedings. On Friday, the 15th of December, the jury retired to consider their verdict. They returned after 20 minutes. The verdict was guilty. There was no recommendation to mercy, which was noted as unusual in the case of a woman at that time. Mr. Justice Stephen pronounced sentence of death. He stated that the murder was cruel, treacherous, and hypocritical. Louisa Jane Taylor was returned to Maidstone Prison, as Plumstead was then within the county of Kent. There was little sympathy expressed for her in the periodicals. The crime was regarded as particularly vile, having been committed against a frail old woman who had received her into the household. As was customary in cases of poisoning, there would be no reprieve. The execution was set for Tuesday, the 2nd of January, 1883. During her time in the condemned cell, Louisa Taylor received no visitors other than her solicitor. She was attended by Miss Davis, the matron. It was reported that she told Miss Davis she was prepared to die. On the Tuesday morning, she was moved from the female wing to a cell near the gallows. There she was visited by the chaplain, the Reverend Mr. Layton. When she was led out into the prison yard and saw the gallows, her courage failed her. She had to be supported on the drop while the executioner, William Marwood, made the necessary preparations. Her last words were recorded as, "Lord Jesus, receive my spirit." She was given a drop of approximately 8 feet. Death was described as instantaneous. The black flag was displayed above the prison. After she had hung for 1 hour, her body was taken down for inquest and burial within the prison grounds. It was reported that very few members of the public were outside the prison to see the death notice affixed to the gate. On the same day, William Tregelles attended Woolwich Police Court and sought an order for the return of his property from various pawnbrokers. The request was granted by the magistrate, who assigned a policeman to accompany him in recovering the items. In the accounts that followed, there was speculation regarding motive. The financial gain from the death of Mary Ann Tregelles could have been small. The Tregelleses were poor and lived on William's pension of 19 shillings each week. Some suggested that the motive may have been money, possibly the expectation of living with William Tregelles and sharing his pension, or obtaining control of the household effects. Others noted that lead is a particularly inefficient poison, requiring many administrations over a long period to achieve death, and that it was easily detected even by the medical knowledge of that time. The extended duration of Mary Ann's suffering, and the continuation of the poisoning even as her condition worsened, led to an alternative suggestion, that Louisa Taylor derived satisfaction from the act itself, from the exercise of power over another person's life and decline. There was also suspicion, though never proven, that Thomas Taylor, Louisa's husband, who had died in March of 1882, had himself been poisoned. No formal investigation was undertaken into his death. Louisa Jane Taylor was the last woman to be executed at Maidstone Prison. The case was recorded in the proceedings of the Old Bailey and in various periodicals of the day. The trial transcript documented the testimonies in detail. The medical evidence concerning the effects of lead poisoning was noted in the forensic literature of the period. The deposition given by Mary Ann Tregelles from her sickbed became part of the official record. The matter of the £500, the letter with the mark on Her Majesty's service, the supposed inheritance from Colonel Sartin, was mentioned but never substantiated. No will was produced. No bank records confirmed any such transaction. The house at Charlton, which Louisa Taylor said she owned, from which she claimed to have removed furniture to make room for the Tregelleses, was mentioned repeatedly in the evidence, but its existence was not confirmed in the trial proceedings. The story of the trip to Ramsgate, the rooms booked at £1 per week, the luggage sent ahead, none of this occurred. Mary Ann Tregelles was buried. William Tregelles returned to his rooms at Naylor's cottages. He lived on his pension. What became of him afterward is not recorded. Mrs. Sarah Ellis continued as landlady. Edward Martin, the watercress seller, was not charged with any crime, though his involvement in the removal of stolen goods was noted. Dr. Smith, who had prescribed sugar of lead to Louisa Taylor for improvement of her complexion, and who had attended Mary Ann Tregelles during her illness, without recognizing the signs of poisoning until the matter was brought to his attention by the police, continued in his practice. The case was discussed in the context of other poisoning cases of the Victorian period, a time when access to toxic substances was relatively unrestricted and when poisons were sold in shops with only the requirement that they be labeled. Lead acetate, known as sugar of lead, was commonly available. It had legitimate uses in medicine and cosmetics. Its sweet taste made it particularly dangerous when mixed with food or drink. The symptoms of lead poisoning were well documented: the blue line on the gums, the blackening of the teeth, the abdominal pain, the vomiting, the progressive weakness, the eventual paralysis and convulsions. The trial received attention because of the nature of the victim, an elderly woman in her own home, and because of the length of time over which the poisoning occurred. It was not a sudden act, but a gradual process, carried out over weeks, with opportunities for observation and intervention. The fact that Marianne Tregelles recovered her health and regained her appetite once Louisa Taylor was removed from the household was considered significant evidence. The fact that she was never sick again after Mrs. Ellis took over her care was noted by the jury. The absence of a recommendation to mercy from the jury was remarked upon. In cases involving women, particularly in the Victorian period, juries often appended such a recommendation even when the evidence was clear, out of a general reluctance to see a woman hanged. The lack of such a recommendation in this case suggested the degree to which the crime was viewed with severity. The execution was carried out by William Marwood, who had served as executioner since 1874. He was known for his use of the long drop method, which was intended to cause death by fracture of the cervical vertebrae rather than by strangulation. The drop of 8 feet given to Louisa Taylor was calculated based on her weight and build. The report that death was instantaneous indicated that the method had functioned as intended. The matter faded from public attention. In the records of executions at Maidstone, the entry for Louisa Jane Taylor is brief: date, name, age, crime, method. In the register of burials within the prison, her name appears. In the catalogue of trials at the Old Bailey, the case is preserved in full, the testimonies recorded, the questions and answers set down, the legal arguments noted. The houses at Naylor's cottages no longer stand. The area of Plumstead has changed. The parish is now part of Greater London. The records remain in archives. The case is studied occasionally as an example of Victorian poisoning cases, as an instance of forensic detection in an era before modern toxicology, as a matter of legal history concerning the treatment of female offenders. In the material that survives, there is no record of Louisa Jane Taylor's own testimony. She did not speak in her defense. The words attributed to her are those recorded by others. The motives assigned to her are speculation. What is known is contained in the depositions, the trial transcript, the death certificate, the execution record. The facts are these. Marianne Tregelles died on the 23rd of October, 1882. Louisa Jane Taylor was convicted of her murder by poisoning. She was hanged on the